Everyone remembers the day when the infamous Bell Gang disappeared without a trace in 1955, leaving behind a trail of chaos and unanswered questions that would perplex investigators and captivate the public imagination for generations to come. This tale begins in the summer of that year in rural Indiana, a time when small towns were often enveloped in secrecy and an unspoken code of silence, and crime lurked in the shadows of cornfields and abandoned barns that dotted the landscape. The Bell Gang was notorious for its string of robberies that spanned several Midwestern states, including Illinois, Ohio, Michigan, and Indiana, creating a criminal empire that seemed to operate with impunity. They were known for their meticulous planning, their ability to strike quickly and disappear even faster, and their almost supernatural ability to elude law enforcement despite increasingly sophisticated efforts to capture them. Headed by the cunning and charismatic Jake Bell, a man whose charm could disarm even the most suspicious observer, the gang included his brother Leo, who served as the muscle and enforcer of the operation, and their childhood friend Jimmy, whose technical expertise and lock-picking skills made seemingly impossible heists achievable. They were inseparable, bonded not just by crime and the thrill of their dangerous lifestyle, but also by an unyielding loyalty to one another that had been forged in the hard-scrabble neighborhoods where they grew up together, sharing dreams of escaping poverty by any means necessary. Their friendship had weathered everything from childhood scrapes to brushes with the law, creating a bond that seemed unbreakable. As July approached, with its oppressive heat and long twilight hours, whispers of their next big heist filled the air in police stations and underworld gathering places alike. What they were planning would be their most audacious crime yet. Intelligence officers had tracked them through a network of informants and intercepted communications to a run-down barn outside of Indianapolis, a structure that had been abandoned for years and stood isolated among overgrown fields, where they were reportedly plotting to rob a freight train laden with electronics, cameras, and other valuable goods that could be easily fenced in Chicago or Detroit. The stakes were high, not just for the gang, who saw this as their ticket to retirement and permanent escape from their criminal lives, but for the authorities eager to claim a victory against such audacious criminals who had made law enforcement look foolish across multiple states. On the night of July 24th, under a moonless sky that provided perfect cover for both criminals and police, an elaborate sting operation was set into motion with over 30 officers involved. Officers surrounded the barn from all sides, carefully positioning themselves to cut off any possible escape routes, but when they stormed in with weapons drawn and shouts of commands echoing through the empty structure, the gang was gone, vanished as if they had never been there, leaving nothing behind but their blueprints for the heist, detailed maps of the train route, a few scattered belongings including half-eaten sandwiches and cigarette butts, and the haunting feeling that they had been one step ahead all along. The police were baffled, their carefully laid plans reduced to nothing. How could 3 men vanish so completely and so quickly? How could they have known the police were coming? The answer was literally beneath their feet. Investigation revealed they had used an underground escape route known only to local lore, an old mining tunnel that had long been sealed and forgotten, dating back to the 19th century when the area had briefly been the site of coal extraction operations. The tunnel entrance had been hidden behind false boards in the barn's floor, and it extended nearly half a mile underground, emerging in a wooded area where the gang had apparently stashed a getaway vehicle. This revelation sparked a frenzy in the media, with newspapers across the Midwest running sensational headlines about the daring escape, and theories emerged overnight like mushrooms after rain. Some speculated they had received help from an insider within law enforcement, someone who had tipped them off about the raid, while others believed they had some supernatural backing or possessed an almost preternatural ability to sense danger before it arrived.
Despite extensive manhunts that mobilized resources across multiple states, roadblocks at every major highway, and wanted posters distributed to every law enforcement agency in the region, the Bell Gang seemed to evaporate into the American landscape. Days turned into weeks with no credible sightings, and soon the trail grew cold as the initial urgency faded and other cases demanded attention. Families in the region felt the impact of the gang's continued freedom. Safety became a common concern that dominated conversations at church socials and town meetings, fueled by fear and uncertainty about when the criminals might strike again. Could these criminals reappear at any moment to terrorize another community, or had they truly gone underground, perhaps living quiet lives under assumed identities where no one would ever think to look for them? Years later, in 1958, when the case had largely faded from front-page news but remained an open wound for the investigators who had failed to capture them, a notorious report emerged claiming the gang may have traveled to Mexico, crossing the border with false documentation, where they allegedly continued their criminal exploits with a new crew and different targets. This was never confirmed, despite efforts by American authorities to coordinate with Mexican police, but it kept the public intrigued and fearful, yearning for justice and closure to a case that seemed to mock the very concept of law and order. 5 years had passed since their disappearance, with no confirmed sightings or leads that panned out, despite numerous false alarms and mistaken identities. But in 1960, everything changed. A breakthrough occurred when a couple traveling through a remote area of Texas reported a strange encounter that would reignite the investigation. They claimed to have seen 3 men matching the Bell Gang's descriptions, loading a truck with crates of firearms and other military-grade equipment in broad daylight, acting as if they had every right to be there. This ignited a new investigation, with fresh agents assigned to the case, but despite their best efforts and the deployment of significant resources, the trail was once again cold by the time authorities arrived at the reported location. The truck had vanished, and locals claimed to have seen nothing unusual, leaving investigators to wonder if the sighting had been genuine or just another case of people seeing what they wanted to see. While the search continued sporadically, hampered by limited resources and competing priorities, rumors of their whereabouts flourished in bars, diners, and anywhere people gathered to swap stories. Some suggested they had assumed new identities and settled down in quiet suburban neighborhoods, perhaps even starting families and living as model citizens, while others believed they returned to Indiana, the scene of their greatest triumphs and closest calls, plotting their comeback and one final spectacular heist that would cement their legend forever. Whatever the truth, the Bell Gang remained an enigma, their legacy shadowed by mystery and the tantalizing possibility that they had achieved what so few criminals ever do, a clean escape and a chance to enjoy their ill-gotten gains in peace. Over the years, various detectives, both active and retired, along with amateur sleuths fascinated by the unsolved case, attempted to connect the dots, piecing together a timeline that contradicted itself as memories faded and witnesses recanted, as new evidence surfaced and disappeared just as swiftly, lost to bureaucratic incompetence or deliberate destruction. The case would haunt local law enforcement for decades, passed down from one generation of officers to the next like an inheritance of failure and frustration.
In the late 70s, when disco dominated the airwaves and a new generation had come of age knowing the Bell Gang only as a legend, a new sheriff took office with promises to solve cold cases that had languished for too long, and he commenced a comprehensive cold case review with fresh eyes and modern techniques. Then, something strange happened. Curiously, shortly after the review was announced publicly, a series of anonymous tips began to surface, cryptic phone calls and letters with no return address containing allegations of a hidden fortune tied to the gang's heists, supposedly buried somewhere in the Indiana countryside, waiting to be discovered by someone clever enough to decipher the clues. The public's fascination morphed into a community-wide obsession, with treasure hunters, both serious and amateur, scouring the Indiana landscape with metal detectors and old maps for remnants of the gang's past crimes, digging holes in fields and along riverbanks, much to the frustration of property owners. Despite the fervor and the countless hours invested by both professionals and hobbyists, nearly half a century passed without a single confirmed lead about the gang's ultimate fate. Were they living the high life overseas in some tropical paradise, their features altered by plastic surgery and their accents carefully practiced? Or did their greed and fate catch up with them in some unmarked grave in the desert, their bodies never to be found and their story never to be fully told? Today, the Bell Gang remains a notorious part of Indiana folklore, a tale of crime, conspiracy, and disappearance that captivates both old-timers who remember the fear they once inspired and newcomers who discover the story through documentaries, podcasts, and local history books. To this day, you can still find locals in diners and barber shops wondering what really happened to the infamous Bell Gang, debating theories that range from plausible to outlandish, and whether their legacy will ever be uncovered or if they succeeded in taking their secrets to the grave, leaving behind only questions and a cautionary tale about the ones who got away.